Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. On this podcast, we talk about all things to improve body composition via more muscle strength and less fat, and doing it all within a flexible framework without destroying your health in the process. Today on the podcast, we have Brandon Day, and we're talking all about the concept of flow, which you probably have heard of this concept before, but if not, Brandon and I talk about what exactly it is, what are some things you can do to increase your chance of getting into flow, some of the intricacies of it, and a whole lot more. So super interesting podcast. Huge thanks to Brandon for sharing all of his knowledge here with us. And on the sponsors portion, we've got the Flex Diet Cert, which opens again on June 17th, 2024. It'll be open for 1 week. Go to flexdiet.com to get all the information there. Or if you have any questions on it, you can email me. This is the certification. If you're looking for the best ways to increase your use of recovery strategies, especially nutrition for recovery, body composition, and performance. I have been working on the ideas in this cert since I started my PhD. So going back to almost 13 years now. It is a melding of the concepts of metabolic flexibility and flexible dieting. And I've used this on literally hundreds of people, just myself. And through the certification, we've been able to work with hundreds more people, which has been awesome. And the nice part about the cert is you'll learn the big picture. What are the concepts of metabolic flexibility and flexible dieting? What are also the intricacies of each one of the 8 interventions that make it up? Everything from protein, fats, carbohydrates, talk a little bit about ketones, basic exercise, NEAT, sleep, micronutrients, fasting, and much more. So you'll learn the details of each one of those in a 1-hour video. So you'll understand, what does the science say? What are the things we should do? And then for each one, you'll have 5 explicit action items within the Flex Diet system. So you will know exactly what is the next action item yourself or your clients need to do next. So one of the things I didn't like about some of the certifications that are out there is they were either really good on the information side and you were left on your own to figure out how to apply it, or they were pretty good on the application side, but their rationale for why they were doing it was sometimes completely wrong or non-existent. So this is a melding of those both components along with the big picture. So you understand the context of when to apply each one of those. So that opens June 17th. Go to flexdiet.com. Also, we've got, if you're looking for an exogenous ketone, we have Tecton. I will have a conflict of interest since I am a scientific advisor and ambassador for them. What I found best about using of these exogenous ketones is, especially now that I got back from South Padre, and the last couple of days I've just been pretty tired. Sleep has been a lot lower. I've been doing more sleep the past 2 nights. And I find in those particular cases, the use of ketones really helps me get back to baseline. Not really sure it takes me above baseline, such as stimulants like caffeine. But the nice part is it's not a stimulant. It is another energy source. And you can use it also later in the day, which I find is one of the big benefits if I'm doing some writing or I'm going to do an aerobic session or even a lifting session later in the day. I don't want to use caffeine or something that's going to keep me up at night. I find the use of higher doses of ketones to be quite effective, which I was still surprised by that. So check them out. Go to the link below. There'll be a code you can use, Dr. Mike, to save 20%. And then we also have the Flex 4 question. So I asked Brandon, what are the top 4 things briefly people should do in order to get into a flow state? And you can listen to that at miketnelson.com/flex4, F-L-E-X, the number 4. We'll have all those links below. And if you are on the newsletter already, you will get this question automatically. If you are not, you can subscribe below. This will also put you onto the daily newsletter. And you'll get all of the Flex 4s that we've done so far. My goal with this is to make the action items very explicit over a very short period of time and all in one place. So if you only want the doing portion, this would be your one-stop shop for that. So go to miketnelson.com/flex4. Enjoy the podcast here with Brandon Day, all about the concept of flow. Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. Thank you so much for being on here, Brandon. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And one of the topics we're going to talk about today, which we haven't talked about a whole lot, is the concept of flow states. So what definition, for people who are new, who my biased opinion is, I think the concepts and the ideas of flow state are absolutely fascinating, but I also feel like the term has been bastardized to hell and back because it's trendy and everybody wants to say everything's a flow state now. So what do you have as a kind of a definition of a flow state before we get into it?
Yeah, I like that intro there. The flow state, the technical definition is it's basically an altered state of consciousness where we feel our best and perform our best. Okay, more specifically, we could call it like any time where you have this total absorption, excuse me, in the task at hand, like rapt attention, so much so that time starts to go away, that the task feels effortless, like one action flows seamlessly to another, right? You also have this paradox of control where you may be doing something you have never even attempted before, but you feel totally in control of yourself, right? So you're right. It's been called by all sorts of different things throughout time, and even now it gets thrown around. It's almost like the word trauma, right?
Yeah, that's the other word that's starting to bug me now.
Yeah. You get this like concept creep where it starts to spread out into everything, and you just call everything flow, or like everything that's ever happened to you is trauma, right? So it definitely does get that, but there are some very specific characterizations that you can say, okay, yeah, that's definitely a flow state. And I think there's 6 big characteristics that the godfather of flow research or flow psychology, his name was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, a Hungarian guy that ended up at the University of Chicago for many years.
And his name is almost like self-prophesizing what he's going to talk about, which I find hilarious too, if you do the poor English translation of it.
Yeah, what is it? I've never even
No, I'm just saying it sounds like sent me high. It sounds to me like, because I'm not very good with foreign languages, it's like, oh, you're kind of high. You're in a flow state. Oh, that's like the perfect last name, even though it has nothing to do with that.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. I never thought about it like that. But he discovered those essentially 6 main characteristics of a flow state. One being that time dilation, where time tends to speed up. An hour goes by in a flash, right? Or on the other hand, it can actually slow way down to where you get this like almost like a freeze frame effect. If you've ever been in like a car accident, where it's just like every moment
feels like it's a frame by frame.
Exactly. Yeah. So that time dilation is a big characteristic of a flow state. That effortlessness is another one where you're just on top of your game. Everything's going right. You can't screw anything up. The richness of the experience, it tends to get so much salience and sensory information that it just feels like everything's a little bit brighter, right? You can hear more acutely. It's almost like you have these spidey senses in a way where everything's heightened. And then you get this like selflessness too, where action and awareness start to merge. And this is where you get that feeling of like oneness, like a surfer who feels like one with the wave, or a musician who's one with their instrument, right? There's no separation between our body and the action of what we're doing. So those are key characteristics that are going to show up in a flow state. So if you don't have those, you call it what you want, but it's probably not an actual flow state. And they've done a ton of research on this now with all the neuroscience research that's been going on in the past, say 20 years since, well, I guess about 30 years now since fMRI came into the fray. Now they can really see what's happening in the brain. And there are a lot of really cool changes that are actually happening in the brain, which make it really an altered state of consciousness. This is a separate state from our regular waking consciousness that they very accurately measured. So, is that a pretty good definition?
Yeah, yeah. What would be some of the changes in brain state that they've
Hmm.
seen? My first thought is it similar to some of like the psychedelic research where you see changes in the default mode network, or are we looking at just different areas of the brain become more active? Like I think I've heard, I don't know which is correct, but I've heard both the frontal lobe becomes more active and less active. And so what are some of the differences there?
Yeah, great question. So, first, I should explain that flow happens in a cycle. So there's four essentially stages that we go through, right? Because it's not really a good idea to spend all your life in flow. In fact, if somebody tells you that they live in flow states, you should probably be wary. They may be a
Yeah,
little,
that's on my list of BS detection. That's number one. Like, I'm
yeah,
always in a flow state. I'm like, nope, not listening to this dude or gal.
right. Yeah, we might actually call that like a mental illness,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, there's something off.
Yeah, that's if you're stuck in a flow state, that's we would call that like mania, right? That's a manic state that wouldn't be good because it's an extremely energy demanding state, right? So we need recovery from that. And that's like the final stage is we got to recover, right? Just like a training bout. We need to warm up. And in flow, we call this first stage the struggle phase because we're really like amping up all of our stress systems like cortisol, adrenaline, like norepinephrine. These things are starting to amp up. And say we're attacking a problem. We got to gather the information. We got to get everything ready. We got to hold it all in our brain and get all of these stress chemicals up to the point where we start to get like frustration, right? And depending on your activity, this may happen more or less, but you actually get to a point where you have to essentially trigger a fight or flight response, right? Think of
So you
like
need a
a,
lot of sympathetic side of the equation to
you do, yeah.
oversimplify it.
Yeah, that's a great way to simplify it. We need to ramp up sympathetics a lot, right? In order to prepare. And then we actually get a small moment. It can be a moment or it can spread out for a long period of time where we actually release. We let go of the problem and we shift from like high beta wave brain states and we start to shift into more alpha to bring it back down. This alpha is like our longer, slower waves, almost like a daydreaming kind of state.
Would you say like a pseudo meditation-ish?
Yeah.
Like you're not completely out, but your still thoughts are still rolling by. And I'd say meditation state for most people like myself who are not among practicing meditation 10 hours a day.
Yeah. We might call it like a light meditative state.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that release is really important to switch networks from that executive network into more of the salience and even into the default mode network for a time to let things simmer in a way. Say we're attacking some really hard problem. We got all these things that we're trying to hold in our head. And we're really narrowly focused. That beta wave state, that high executive function, high frontal lobe activity, that's that struggle phase. Then we let it go in the release. And we let our unconscious mind take over. And it's going to make these lateral connections and all this stuff through that default mode network and spread things out a bit. And then when we come back, and this can be in moments, right? We come back, we drop right into flow, and we see more of the alpha brainwave, alpha and theta brainwave states in a flow state. And you actually do get that what's called transient hypofrontality.
Yeah, Stephen Kotler's talked a lot about that.
Yeah. So the original researcher is a guy named Arne Dietrich, and he discovered this weird sensation where when you were in a flow state, this also happens quite often in exercise. Exercise is one of the best ways to find flow, number one, but also to find this state of transient hypofrontality, meaning transient meaning for a short period, hypo being the opposite of hyper, so meaning less than, and frontality, frontal lobe activation. So short-lived frontal lobe shutting down, essentially. So, and that's where your self-rumination, your self-critic, your self-doubt, like all of this self-reflection, the thinking brain that's always second-guessing our actions and making sure we're safe and inhibiting things like that kind of shuts down in the flow state, which allows us to really take more risks, yes, but also not be inhibited and not second-guess ourselves and just go with that and in a way trust ourselves a little bit more to do what needs to be done. So that flow state is when it really kicks into high gear and the frontal lobe shuts down, but like the cerebellum, these back parts of the brain really amp up. They take those resources and they just roll with them.
Like more movement orientated stuff, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So the cerebellum is like its main functions are accuracy, balance, coordination of movement, but also inhibition of unwanted movement or even unwanted thoughts and these type of things. Emotional regulation actually happens in the cerebellum as well. So when we shut down this frontal lobe and then take all those resources back there, a lot of that movement that's stored back there is like procedural type memory. So it's things we're already really skilled at, right? And so they become like automatic. And that's where this like effortlessness comes in because we've done these things many times, so they become automatic and we just flow through them without having to second guess or think about it. And it's a really incredibly enjoyable experience because of just this massive neurochemical cocktail that happens in the brain, like this increase in norepinephrine and dopamine, you know, that just drives our attention and focus into the moment, right? And just really latches us on to the task at hand. But then you also get these other endorphins and endocannabinoids like anandamide, which doesn't show up very often, but it shows up in exercise and in flow states. And it's ananda, the first part of that word is actually a Sanskrit word that means bliss.
Mm-hmm.
So this is known as the bliss molecule. And beyond the like pain relief and other stuff that the endorphins and these endocannabinoids can do, like it just gives you this overall sense of like euphoria and like it's a really
The
good
main
feeling.
molecule of the runner's high. People used to think it was
Exactly.
endorphins, and it's actually anandamide release primarily.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that along with a little serotonin juice showing up in there and all these other neurochemicals make it like one of the most enjoyable experiences that we can have as humans endogenously, right? Most people are out there seeking this from exogenous substances like psychedelics or others. And psychedelics, they actually have a really similar looking profile in the neurochemicals that show up and the brain networks and everything, very similar to a flow state with some small differences, key differences, but the main thing is like well, number one, the risk and the, how do you say it? Like the control, I guess might be a way to say it. Like anytime you're using an exogenous substance, you're hijacking your own system in a way. And they have their place. And I'm a big believer in like plant medicine and therapeutic uses of those substances. But I would much rather find that from my own experience and endogenously, right? From something that I'm curious about in a way that my body and my brain are built to seek out. So,
And in my experience, I would not call 5 glasses of ayahuasca a flow experience by any stretch of the imagination.
yeah, yeah,
Parts of it, maybe a little bit, but overall, no, it's just a different thing altogether.
yeah, it certainly is. And when you're getting up to that level,
At
like
a
that's
high dose. Yeah, low doses are
well
different. Yeah.
beyond, well beyond what a normal flow state is. But flow does sit on a spectrum, and we can have a micro flow state. Like you just batch all your emails at the end of the day, put on some good music, boom, you can drop into flow, and that hour can go by in 5 minutes, right? What was supposed to be a 3-word response turns into 3 paragraphs, and you're just like you're Ernest Hemingway, just clicking away on those keys. That can be a flow state right there. And that's a lot of what I coach people in is like, how do we find flow in areas outside of those high flow activities that you're already pretty prone to find flow. Most of us have one of those and they fall in our hobbies or in our sports or whatever we do for fun. And those are usually bigger flow states, but we can have them all the way down from that micro up to bigger, and like a macro huge flow state is essentially like a mystical experience. And you mentioned Stephen Kotler, and like I'm a huge fan of
Yeah,
his.
Rise of Superman is a great book. It's older now, but I think when he put that book
Yeah.
out, that was well ahead of his time.
Yeah, I believe it was 2012 or 2013
Yeah.
when that book came out, and it was one of the first of its kind, especially adding in the neuroscience of it, because everything before was Chick Sent Me High, and it was all based in positive psychology and really great work that pioneered it, and Kotler kind of took the torch. But the I forgot why I brought him up.
Well, one of the questions related to that, and you'll think of your other comment, is one of his things was because of like action sports or people doing these huge gap jumps and parachuting and mountain biking and all the, crazy extreme sports that were exploding at that point. I think his main argument was that this is the perfect playground to study flow because it has all the components and it has the high risk component of, like, even for me, like just doing smaller jumps, kiteboarding, doing 20 feet in the air, like you don't really want to check out like at 20 feet up in the air. Or if you're doing a steep drop on a snowboard or mountain bike or whatever, like it's not good. So I think one of his arguments was
Yeah.
because these sports almost set up all these components perfectly, and the fact that these people, guys and gals, are professionals doing it, and that the consequence of screwing it up is so high that it becomes like this perfect kind of playground to look at all these things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And he initially wasn't even looking at flow. He was just following around action adventure sport athletes because nobody else at the magazine, whatever, wanted to do it, right?
Yeah.
He was into those sports and liked those people. So he did that, and he noticed that something was going on that was strange here because they were exponentially increasing their results and everything. And eventually, yes, that's exactly right. He found that this was just a playground that was totally rich in what they call flow triggers. It was just chock full of them. And one of them being risk is a hugely potent flow trigger. And it makes sense evolutionarily. Like when the risk goes up, we need to focus, right? We got to survive this. So flow actually is a evolutionarily adaptive state for the human being in order to evolve and to survive. In those action adventure sports, like the more risk, the more focus you get. We call it getting focus for free, right? So you ramp up those neurochemicals because you got to really pay attention. That sympathetic state goes to 10 immediately. We talk about fight or flight. You got to fight, right? You got to attack the mountain. You have to attack the wave, right? You can't go in all willy-nilly and just, no, well, we'll give it a shot. That's a really good way to get very hurt or worse, right? So yeah, you got to have that mentality, that fight response, and that's what, takes you past the struggle and straight into flow. So that's the other draw with some of those sports is like that struggle phase is very small. It's you approaching the mountain, and in an instant, you're dropping in and you're going to go into flow. So a lot of reasons why those kind of sports were just ripe for flow. The unfortunate thing, and there is a dark side to flow, is that when you continually chase triggers like risk, the eventual end to that is usually not good.
Yeah, all those people have, like Travis Pastrana listing the amount of injuries he's had, and I think he's broken almost every bone in his body, and he's, but yeah, it's the cost of doing it. He's just, it's
Yeah.
just part of the game. I'm like, poof.
And how lucky has he been in his.
Oh, 100%. Like he's had so many accidents that he could have died, like which he will
Yeah.
fully admit himself.
Yeah. And it's all too common to see really high level athletes in those action adventure sports end up passing in these accidents. And it's, on the one hand, they're pushing the limits of their sport and their body and their brain and everything else. And that can be commendable, right? But on the other hand, is that really necessary for a life well lived? Is there another way that we can find flow, which is the state that they're really seeking? It's
Yeah.
not that most of these people are out there for the records or
A lot of
like,
them don't even compete
right.
formally. Some do, but yeah.
That's exactly right. Most of the time, these people are dying out there on their own, or maybe with a friend, just doing the thing that they love. Like they don't care about the external rewards, right? And this is the difference and why flow is so powerful because it's stacking what are called intrinsic motivators or intrinsic drivers, like our basic biological drives, right? To seek out curiosity, to follow our passions, the things that we love to do. And there was called autotelic in nature, meaning that you would do it, or it is an end in itself. I think is the kind of the definition of that word, but it means you do it without any care for money, fame, or any other external reward. You would do it just for the sake of doing it because you love to do it, right? And most of these people are doing exactly that. And they're seeking flow states. We used to call them adrenaline junkies, but they're
Yeah.
not. A better term is flow junkie, right? They're seeking the flow state, but here's a perfect example. I've been working with a new client for a couple months now, and he's a wild guy. Like he's a paramedic helicopter pilot and a sea captain, a merchant marine captain. And he is a former professional skier. He just sailed his sailboat solo from Vancouver Island around to the Caribbean and
Oh,
Antigua, where
damn.
now 8,000-mile trip, just solo, just because he wanted to go out and have a sail. And this is how he lives his life. It's like it's always the next adventure. What's next? Let's go. Let's keep rolling. And he's one of one of three helicopter pilots in the world who can fly into these certain areas that have a margin of error on the landing pad. Think like way up in the mountains in weather, like rescue missions where their landing margin of error is centimeters. Like he's one of three in the world, and you can imagine the amount of focus and the
Oh,
amount of,
yeah.
yeah, the precision and intense attention that he has to pay in these times, like ripe for flow. And when I first talked to this guy, he's, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Everything you're saying makes perfect sense. The issue for him is his relationships are starting to suffer. He is always seeking the next high, right? He's always searching for that next flow state. And if he doesn't have access to it, if today I'm not working or I don't get to sail because the engine's out, I can't get it out of the marina, whatever, I don't have access to this, then he would in the past seek it through some kind of other substance. And along with all of those crazy experiences in a helicopter comes a little like PTSD. There's some other things that kind of come along with living a high risk lifestyle like that. So long story short, we start working together, and the main deal for me, and this is where the applied neurology comes in that you and I talked about a little bit before we jumped on here, was we got to get his brain back to a state where it's not constantly under threat, and the only time he feels like he can get out of that threat is when he's in flow. And so there's this big discrepancy between just normal life where he's like in pain and his system's constantly under threat because his brain function and all of the injuries that he's had are constantly telling his brain we just don't even feel safe just walking around the world. But then when he gets into flow, all of those neurochemicals, there is no more threat. Because when you're in a like state of live or die, which those high risk scenarios definitely are for him, your brain no longer cares about that ankle injury from 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's got other priorities to deal with.
It doesn't care if you break your ankle right now. It's going to say, you know what? That pain can wait. We need to survive this situation. first. And so flow is going to take over. Those endorphins, that anandamide, is going to say, nope, that pain is not worth it right now to pay attention to. So we're just going to tune down that signal. We're going to drive flow to get you out of the situation. But just be aware that when you're at home later, that's going to hurt a lot. That's going to come back, right? So for a guy like that, which is this is a lot of the clients that I see are this kind of really high performing risk takers, the flow junkies that are at a point where they've seen a lot of success, whether in business or in sport or whatever. But they're dealing in their normal life, they're dealing with a lot of pain, whether that's psychological, like anxiety, depression, PTSD, or most often it's very physical, chronic pains that they've been ignoring for years that are just adding so much threat to the system that the brain is just, bro, I don't know what to do with you. Let's just go find flow, right? Because that's when we feel the best.
No,
And
it's
so
your
that,
brain's going to force you into the only solution. If you don't have a tool bag or other solutions that are maybe lower cost, lower threat, it's, oh, hey, let's go do this again because that solved all of our problems last time. Woohoo!
that's exactly right. Yeah, perfectly said. And they end up relying on like the one trigger that they know is going to help. It's going to get them into flow every time, and that's risk. So then they're just continually chasing that dragon, trying to find the risk. Because as you said, principle, right? Specific adaptation to impose demands. Our brain, our body, we're going to adapt to whatever we do all the time, right? So if you are constantly putting yourself in risky scenarios all the time, eventually that same level of risk doesn't give you the same reward
Mm-hmm.
anymore. You got to keep pushing it, right? That's where it can become addictive in a sense. And flow can be very addictive, right? In a positive way or a negative way. It's just based on the context and how productive we can make it. Video games, high flow activity,
Yeah.
very high flow activity.
That's why I don't allow myself to play video games. It's not because I have anything against them or think they're evil or
Because you
think
love
they're bad,
them.
that I have an addictive personality and I know that the games are just too damn good.
Yeah,
I would get nothing done and it wouldn't be good.
yeah, I'm the same way. I used to play when I was younger, but I just can't even have them in the house anymore because it's just, they're just too
Yeah.
fun. They'll just suck me right in because they're chock full of flow triggers. Like
Yeah, that's their job as a game
designers,
designer. They want you to
designers.
play the game for as long as possible. I can't remember who said
Yeah.
this, but he said that he'll allow his kids to play an older game, like an older Nintendo game that you have to purchase on like a cartridge, that there's
Mm.
no online component, but he will not allow them to play free online games on their iPad because he said those are even more
Oh,
engineered to get you to stay longer because they want you to pay. Their whole
yeah,
goal is to get you to pay. Where the other thing, yeah, maybe the technology was good, then the gameplay is good, but it's a fixed thing. You already purchased it. They don't really care if you finish, you play the game, you don't play the game, whatever. Yeah, they want you to finish it and
yeah,
buy the next one, but is that it's not nearly as addictive as the new kind of online versions, especially if they're free, where their whole goal is just to get money from you.
yeah. And they are engineered very well to do that. And they're playing on the same triggers, that we're talking about. Social media is the same thing. Right?
Yeah.
It's all playing on that like that dopamine system, right? Trying to capture your attention. And which is why it's so hard for many people these days to find flow and why so many people, you and I have a really good understanding already of it, and we have high flow activities because we've probably grown up doing that. And part of my story is I lost access to flow because when I got done playing college football, I didn't have a backup high flow activity. And I
Mm.
stopped basically playing sports altogether and went into making movies and then moved to LA and was just all in on that. But I lost access to that. And I didn't know why I was so depressed, why like I was abusing substances and I had some PTSD going on and all of these mental health issues. I didn't understand that it was just at a basic level, it was access to flow that I was missing. And I like this is why I'm so passionate about it, because that was such a light bulb for me. And I realized that a lot of people don't have that regular access to it to begin with. And that's to me is just terrible. It's a terrible way to go through life, not having access to this like innate superpower, number one, to do amazing things, but also just this like pharmacy in your brain that just can make you feel so good and get you out of these like negative states with just a simple switch that is driven by our own innate biology for to seek out things that we are curious about, right? And that's really just all it has to start as. Find some curiosities, chase them down, and then play with the triggers a little bit, and you can find yourself in flow. So that's been my mission, is like helping people, number one, find that if you've never really experienced it, and just find it more consistently and know that you can get there if you can set up your environment and know what you're looking for. And like the biggest thing, like here's the golden rule of flow states. So anything you're doing, whether that be a high flow activity like a sport or some kind of movement practice, or even all the way down to like our most menial maintenance activities like folding our laundry or doing the dishes, writing emails. The golden rule of flow, and this can help people find more flow than any other of the triggers, of which there's 20, 25. We're finding more all the time, but this one is probably the biggest one. It's called the challenge skills balance. So very simply, it's pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. Aim for 1%, 1 to 4%. That's like the golden rule there. And if we put it on a graph, like on this x-axis come here, we've got the challenge of the activity, right? How hard is it? How difficult? On the other side, on the y-axis, we've got your skill level, your current skill level, where you're at, okay? Flow sits right in the middle, where challenge and skills meet, okay? If we got something that's too challenging, right, for our current skill level, we're gonna find anxiety. It's gonna be just too much, a little out of reach, right? We're not gonna find flow there. It's gonna be too hard. On the other hand, if it's not enough challenge for our current skill level, then we're just gonna get bored. Think about doing the dishes. Boring, right? We usually don't want to do it because it's not challenging, right? There's nothing, whatever. We're thinking about something else, right? Ruminating on the past or getting anxious about the future. That's not being in the moment, right? And flow is all about being in the deep now, right? As it's sometimes called. So if we can increase the challenge of whatever task we're doing to match our skill level, we can find flow in there and we can make that an enjoyable experience. For the dishes example, we want to follow that one up. You could time yourself. Give yourself some constraints, right? Only do it with your non-dominant hand. Or I'm like an amateur musician, so I like to sing. So I'll do some humming or singing while I'm doing my dishes. Or neuro drills. I'll throw in some neuro drills, maybe some vision drills while I'm doing dishes. So it's keeping me occupied and I'm doing the dishes at the same time. You can get lost in the moment, which is what we're looking for. That's a micro flow state right there. So there's a million different ways that we can toy with this challenge skills balance and just tune the dials a little bit so that our brain is like more engaged and we can find that flow state. And the cool thing is like flow begets flow. So the more flow we find, the more time we spend in the present moment, the more likely we're going to find it in other areas, right? So our brain is a pattern recognition machine. So it's always going to be seeking out, how can I find this in all the other areas of my life? So then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and we start to live that high flow lifestyle. And that's just my opinion at this point, but I think this is a really therapeutic tool that we can use to get rid of a lot of the garbage mental health issues that we've been dealing with that have us stuck in the future or reliving the past all the time, right? What's the cure for that? Live in the present moment, right? Easier said than done, but if we can find a way to find flow, it takes care of itself. So
I agree. And what are your thoughts about? So my bias is for people who are very unfamiliar with these things to start on the higher end, right? I can make any discussion talk about why people should learn to kiteboard, but learn any type of recreation. You could even apply this to weightlifting if you want.
Yeah.
Learn a new skill, spend your money on the best instructor you can find who can properly grade you with graded exposure. Here's these cues, trying to set you up for success, not having you do things that are too hard or you're bored and they're too easy,
Yep.
because there is some risk. There's a lot of novelty. You haven't done it before. And I think once you experience flow in those states, it's a little bit easier. And then you know what it's like and you have that one thing you can look for and
Yes.
then go backwards from there. It's like with breathing techniques, like I've taught some breath work for quite a while. I'm not the best at teaching it, but the thing I thought most profound, like by the Wim Hof or the Tumo superventilation method, was, oh, in 5 minutes, you can have people feeling absolutely spacey from breath work. That may not be the goal all the time. There's definitely a downside to doing that. However, for me, it was incredibly powerful to show people that, yeah, breath work can dramatically alter your state. Where
Mhm.
if you do the Zen style, go stare at a tree for an hour, yeah, I don't know. It was cool. Like, I don't know if I feel that different. There's not that profound sense of, oh, I get it. So I'm going to go further down this path.
Yeah. Yeah. And you nailed it. Like when I'm starting with somebody, or if I was just doing like a drive-by, somebody was just asking me, what do I do? Yes, find a high flow activity. And the best place to look are the things that you're curious about. So I'll often have people just write down, just make a list, like a running list of all the things that you're curious about. Anything works, right? Now, you start to find where those curiosities cross over, and that's where you start to find passion and you start to go down that road and you can really find purpose and follow that. We're stacking intrinsic drivers when we do this, but to find a high flow activity, a couple things to look for. If it's movement based, it's going to be easier to find flow because one of the top flow triggers is deep embodiment. The more we can be inside our body, right, and moving our body, which is why breath work is awesome, but also any kind of movement-based activity is going to be more ripe for flow. And that exercise-induced transient hypofrontality kind of works in here. Exercise is the best way to get that mind to quiet down and to get us into flow. Another thing that you mentioned that's really important is having a coach or at least someone that can help you with some feedback on whether or not you're doing it correctly, how to improve, whatever. A lot of times we're going to find that in some of our movement-based things, or like sports, for example, like say you're playing basketball, you either make the shot or you don't,
Yeah.
right?
You have immediate
Pretty,
feedback.
pretty good feedback right there. But it's also really helpful to have a coach to point out and to cue in order to increase your skill level, right? And they can toy with that challenge better than you can on your own because they've got more experience and they know where to poke, right? So that immediate feedback, the deep embodiment, those are really important. The challenge, skills, balance, also really important. So if you find an activity and say you're a total beginner at it, that's fine, right? Find a level where you can find some, and I'm trying to use a different word, like some smoothness to it, right? And one thing that I'll do for myself when I'm trying something new or with a client when I'm teaching them something new is I will try to help them find some rhythm in anything that they're doing. Like I'll break a movement down into its component pieces and we'll build it from the ground up very methodically. But that's not going to help them find flow. What's going to help them find flow is to integrate it together and to find some smoothness of that movement. And rhythm is a really good way to help them do that. Set a metronome and have them practice a movement, right, to the metronome. This is why music is so ripe for flow and why dancing is one of the top high flow activities
Hmm.
for anyone to do because it's ripe with flow triggers.
Does that include mosh pits or just dancing?
Heck yes, including mosh pits. One of my favorite dancing activities. But remember back in the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about that transient hypofrontality and how a lot of those resources go to the back of the brain and like the cerebellum specifically. And the cerebellum, remember, does like accuracy, balance, and coordination. And a big component to help drive activation to the cerebellum is rhythm, right? So if we can get some rhythm going, then we're going to drive more activation there. That's going to help us get out of this front brain into the back brain and drive us into flow. So yeah, rhythm is a really powerful flow trigger. So you can find something where you're moving your body, something where you got immediate feedback, where the challenge is just beyond your current skill level. If you can find some rhythm in that, you're gonna be well on your way to finding flow in that activity, whatever it is. And even better if you can do it with other people, right? The social aspect to flow is really powerful. And there's a whole nother concept called group flow that could be a whole nother conversation that's incredibly powerful as far as enjoyment and social bonding and this. I don't know if you've ever heard the term collective effervescence.
Mm-hmm.
That's really powerful thing that most of us have experienced if we've ever been to a concert, if we go to church, right? These are built around this concept of group flow and this coming together and synchronizing of all of these separate beings and energies coming together. So really cool stuff. But if I was trying to help someone just starting out with flow states, that's what I would do is find a high flow activity. And it's something that you are curious about or that you already really enjoy, right? And if you can find that one, then that you can use as, and that should not be something you're paid to do. I'll lay that out there. This should be something that's totally free, your own choice. Keep your high flow activities separate from your work because you need one that's more respite, like more time spent for you and only you, right? It's good to keep those separate. It's great to find flow in your work, and that's to me, that's like incredibly important thing to do in life, but you want to have that other one too. Right. So go out there and find something that you're really curious about, something that you love to do that you would do just for the sake of doing it. And play with those triggers and see if you can't find yourself at the end of 2 hours being like, huh, wow, that went by fast. I feel really good. That's all it is, right? And the more we do that, the more we'll start to feel that in other areas and it starts to spill over. So
Yeah, the thing about rhythm and timing, I think, is so key because I've even noticed this, like just lifting here is certain. I can only listen to certain music. It's mostly just very loud death metal. But even within that, I love Gojira. I love Mastodon. I love
mm,
those bands. They're probably one of my top two favorite bands of all time. Meshuggah's another one, but oh my
nice.
God, there's so many time signatures. There's so much shit going on that I can't lift to them because I think there isn't that sense of rhythm. Again, not all their songs are like that. But if I put on something like a helmet, for an example, which is very almost classical, like just like very rhythmic type music, I find that's a lot easier too, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, so one recommendation I could give to you is use that rhythmic music more in like your warm-ups. If you do neuro drills and stuff as you warm up, right? Try to find some rhythm in there, and that'll at least get you into the mode, drop you into flow. And then you can turn on the Meshuggah like when you're ready for your max lift. When you need it, because it's going to give you a little boost too,
Oh yeah, yeah.
right? That's real. I'm a big Slipknot fan.
Oh, I love Slipknot.
Love some Meshuggah too. But I will throw that on when it's time to go because I know it's going to drop me into an even deeper mode, like that fight mode, right? But when I'm doing a regular movement practice or something, yeah, for me, it's more like EDM. Like I'll listen to some house music because it's always 140 beats per minute
Hmm.
and it's very predictable. And my brain likes that. And so I'll be able to find flow in the movement part of it a little bit better. But again, when it's time to rock, like it's time to go, so I'll throw that on, but it can be helpful.
Cool. Where can people find more about you? Tell us where they can get the six essential things, and if people want to work with you, give us all the info.
Yeah, so if you want to download those 6 non-negotiables, that little cheat sheet, you can go to neuroflowcoaching.com. It's right there, super easy to download that. You can also follow me on Instagram at neuroflowcoaching or hit me up on Facebook. I'm Brandon Day. That's my personal page. And yeah, those are the 3 big places where I'm at mostly.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely put all those in the notes today. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you have to run off and teach. I got to run off here, but yeah, I
Thank you.
really appreciate it. This was a good conversation and some fun stuff I think people can definitely check out.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate it. Huge thanks to Brendan for all of his time here. We'll put links to everything he's doing, including some programs that he has down below. Note, I am not affiliate for any of the programs. I do not make any money off of them, but I wanted to help highlight some of the great work that he's doing. So if you are interested in checking those out, please go to the links below. If you want to know his top 4 items of how to get into flow in about 5 minutes or less, go to MikeTNelson.com/flex4, F-L-E-X, the number 4, and you'll be able to get those. And that will also put you onto the daily newsletter, where we have a lot more information. Right now, probably 90+% of my content goes out to the newsletter first. Good portion of it only goes to the newsletter and doesn't show up anywhere else. And it's free, so check that out there. If you want interested in Tecton, which is a tasty exogenous ketone beverage for increases in performance, and I especially like it for cognitive function, especially if I've been a little bit tired or sleep's been off with travel and everything else. Check out the link below, and you can use the code Dr. Mike to save 20%. A side note, I am a scientific advisor there, and I am an ambassador, so I do make some money off of the link, but it's something that I've been using a fair amount and think that it definitely does have a place. So check it out. Any questions on that, hit me up. And the last part is a Flex Diet Cert will open again June 17th, 2024. Go to flexdiet.com if you're looking for your complete one-stop for all things nutrition, recovery, and performance related. This would be your ticket. Again, we're primarily focusing more on the nutrition side, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, but we do also include sleep, micronutrients, basic exercise, walking, because all of those things are going to impact your ability to make changes in the body composition and performance. So our goal here, if I steal a line from my friend Juliet Starrett, is to unconfuse or deconfuse people. I think the world of nutrition is very confusing. And my goal with this was, it is based on some of my bias with metabolic flexibility and flexible dieting, but to make it based on the literature as much as possible, in addition to the, almost going on, 20 years now, I spent looking at this stuff and working with clients. Wanted to distill it down into a complete system that you can then learn, and then more importantly, you can apply. So it is very keen on the applied knowledge side of the equation. So we actually tell you how to use all of the information in the complete system also. So if you have any questions on that, hit me up. Go to flexdiet.com to get onto the waitlist and the newsletter for that. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Really appreciate it. If you find someone who may enjoy this episode, please forward it to them. Do all the wonderful things to help us with the old algorithm, like it, share it, all that good stuff. It really helps us get into more different ear holes with the podcast. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
Well, they say all good things come to an end.
What's that got to do with this show?
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician